In this video I would like to tell you about a composition technique that utilizes modes to create some remarkable sounding music, and I would like to call that modal chaining. The sound is very special and the trick is easy once I have explained this tiny yet powerful way of making music that really stands out. Now, I've heard it in music of Vangelis and Steve Vai, but maybe you'll recognize the sound of other musicians and other pieces of music. Now, I will give you two examples, a dreamy Lydian example and a Vangelis resembling Dorian example. The concept is based on using the characteristic note of a mode, which I like to call the modal trigger note. Now, the modal trigger note triggers the modal sound, like the augmented fourth degree in a Lydian scale. And if you're not familiar with the characteristic note of a mode or modes in general, then you should watch a tutorial about modes first, my tutorial. So we'll use the modal trigger note of a melody to do a so-called common note modulation. We'll modulate to the same mode but with a different tonic. And in this way we end up with a chain of, for instance, Dorian modes or Lydian modes. The effect is remarkable, mysterious and beautiful. So let's see how to pull this off. Now, first you have to know what the modal trigger notes are for the Lydian and the Dorian mode, which are the modes that I use in the examples. But in the end, you'll have to know what the modal trigger note is for each and every mode, if you want to apply this to other modes, that is. Now, I assume that this stuff isn't new for you, so let's quickly walk through the modes and find out what the characteristic note is for each mode. Now, the first mode is the major scale itself, or Aeolian mode, which is a major scale with a perfect fourth and major seventh degree. The second mode is the Dorian mode, which is a minor scale with a natural or major sixth degree. The modal trigger note is that major sixth degree. Now the third mode is the Phrygian mode. This is a minor scale with a flattened second degree. And that is the note that is the modal trigger note, the minor second degree. Now the fourth mode is the Lydian mode, which is a major scale with an augmented fourth degree. The sharp 4 is the modal trigger note of the Lydian mode. The fifth mode is the Mixolydian mode, which is a major scale with a flattened 7th degree or minor 7th degree, which is the modal trigger note for the Mixolydian mode. The sixth mode is the minor scale, or better Aeolian mode, that is a minor scale with a minor 6th degree, and that is the modal trigger note for the Aeolian mode. Now finally, the seventh mode is the Locrian mode, that is a minor scale with a diminished 5th and minor 2nd degree. It's a very weird sounding scale. The modal trigger note is a diminished 5th. So now that you know the characteristic note for each mode, let's have a look at the common note modulation technique before we go on with the two examples. Now for modal chaining we use a kind of common note modulation, which is one of the most interesting and at the same time the most easiest way to modulate. With common note modulation you can modulate to any key or any chord. Just make sure that both chords of the old and new key have one note in common. For instance, C major and C sharp minor have the note E in common. So if the melody ends on the note E over the C major chord, then you can use this note as the minor third of the C sharp minor chord and modulate to C sharp minor, like this. So the Lydian mode is a major scale with an augmented 4th degree. It is a bright and uplifting sound, but it has also a dreamy character. And to make a Lydian modal chain we have to start with a major chord or a major 7th chord. Now you can also add the sharp 11 to the chord to establish a Lydian sound. The sharp 11 is the same note as the sharp 4 and is the modal trigger note of the Lydian mode. Now we'll play a Lydian melody over the first chord, and then we'll use the last note of that melody as the modal trigger note for the next Lydian mode, and so on and so on. In my example I started with the G major chord and the melody that starts on the Lydian modal trigger note C sharp. The motif repeats itself during the development of the rest of the melody, and this binds the melody into a consistent result. Now the melody on the G chord ends on the note F sharp, which is the major 7th of the G major chord, but it is also the augmented 4th and modal trigger note of the C Lydian mode. So the next chord is the C major chord, and the melody starts on the F sharp, thus triggers the C Lydian mode. Then I follow this method throughout the progression. The note B is the major 7th of the C major chord and the augmented 4th of the F Lydian mode. The note D is the major sixth of the Lydian scale and is the augmented fourth of the A-flat Lydian scale. The note F is the major sixth of the A-flat Lydian scale and is enharmonic equal to the E-sharp, which is the augmented fourth in the B-Lydian mode. The D-sharp is the major third in the B-Lydian scale and is the augmented fourth in the A-Lydian scale. Now, then the progression ends on an F-sharp major chord that creates an open ending. Here's the complete Lydian modal chain. As you can hear, it sounds really special and still cohesive, and that is because the chords change with a common note modulation. The extra dimension and emotion is caused by using a Lydian trigger note as a common note, and that creates a surprising modulation. Now let's do another one. Now the Dorian mode is a minor scale with a natural or major sixth degree. It is often described as a hopeful sounding minor scale. And to make a Dorian chain progression, we have to start with a minor chord or a minor 7 chord. And we can also add the major sixth to the chord, creating a minor 6 chord, which is a typical Dorian chord because of that characteristic natural sixth. It's the modal trigger note. Again, I play a Dorian melody that ends on the major sixth of the next Dorian scale. So the characteristic Dorian major sixth will serve as our common note for our common note modulation. And this will be repeated over the next 4 chords. Now in the example I use the progression A minor, C minor, E flat minor and F sharp minor, and I end on the C sharp major chord. So the melody starts with a Dorian motive in A Dorian over the A minor 7 chord. And this melody ends on the note A, which is the root of the A minor 7 chord, but it is also the major sixth of the C Dorian scale. The C Dorian motive evolves over the C minor 7 chord and ends on the tonic C, which is the major sixth and modal trigger note of the E flat Dorian mode. Over the E flat minor 7 chord I play an E flat Dorian melody that ends on the tonic E flat that is enharmonic equal to the note D sharp, and that is the major sixth and modal trigger note of the F sharp Dorian mode. The melody finds its end on the C sharp major chord. Now here is the whole Dorian chain progression and melody. Now when I finished this, it reminded me of the second movement of Soil Festivities by Vangelis, but then a vast number of levels less genius. Well, one can try, right? Now the conclusion can be that modal chaining is a nice trick to create some interesting sounds. And you could try to do this with other modes too. And you don't need to use many chords and modulations. Just one chord change as a modal chain will work absolutely fine too. Needless to say is that you can take this a step further and try this with modes of other scales like the melodic minor scale or harmonic minor scale, for instance. Now I hope this was crystal clear for you, and above all that you can use this for making some great noise out there. Hope to see you next time. Bye.